Or back in session on the Delaware County Board of Supervisors Special Session Budget Workshop, and we wish to welcome Agricultural Department to the chair. And please inform us as you can on what the Ag Department is responsible for and your staffing, please.
Our staffing right now is 5 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. We are fully staffed at the moment. We are responsible for 10 major agricultural programs. We are also responsible for weights and measures in the county, which includes a number of consumer protection programs.
Any questions from the board about the agricultural budget 251?
So, Justin, your actual payroll for these prior 2 years compared with today's recommended budget has increased by 104% and 62%. Can you explain what the increase is in your projected budget for payroll?
Sure. So at the start of that period, we were still working fully with animal services. So we were both overseeing both ag and animal services. So at the beginning of that period, we weren't really doing much ag work at all. And so we didn't have, we had a lot of positions vacant, and so that was part of the issue. Specifically speaking, we had our full-time biologist position was vacant, so that's a professional position that carries a significant expense. Our administrative secretary position was split between animal services and agriculture, which was completely insufficient for those 2 divisions. The commissioner's salary was split between the 2 divisions, so that's another significant expense. All of our employees except for 1 are still at a stage where they're moving up through steps and career ladder advances. So every year until that stops, we're going to see, our payroll increase. And our biologist was promoted to supervising biologist during that time frame. We had a reorganization of the department, which provided a modest wage adjustment for our 2 biologist positions, as well as our 2 ag tech positions.
And so you currently have all of your positions filled, is what you just said?
I just said that, yes.
Okay, and that's the, prior we had, so instead of doing the Deputy Agriculture Commission, we've opted to do a supervising biologist. Did we shift from that?
It's an or, so it could be filled, it can be flexibly staffed by either a supervising biologist or a deputy commissioner.
Okay.
And if it had to be, it could also be staffed by a biologist. We could have 2 biologists and no supervisor if we needed to.
Okay. And you're very comfortable with that structure?
Yes.
Okay, good. So on line 20230, your professional services have averaged about 8,600, but you're requesting 24,000 this year. So do you have any specific projects in mind that you're wanting to get accomplished?
The biggest expense in there is that we need to pay for outside testing of our truck scales in the county and livestock scales. These heavy capacity scales that require a big rig to come in and test. It isn't practical for us to maintain that kind of equipment and staff with the appropriate driving license to do that ourselves. It's just more practical to pay an outside company. The cost of paying that outside company has gone up fairly sharply, like a lot of other things have. So I want to make sure we'll be able to fully afford that. Also, and we have to pay out of this area for sub-meters. So what these are at, say, mobile home parks. They're going to sub-meter out electricity and propane to each individual space. And we don't know, those are tested every 10 years, and we don't really know each time how many are going to come up. We also especially don't know how many new ones are going to be placed into service. So we need to have enough money to pay to have those tested on an outside basis. We're not able to do that right now. I'm hoping that we will get that capacity at some point. We're obligated to get all these devices tested. So, if people bring it to us to test, we've got to make sure that we can afford to have that done. And our supplies and services budget doesn't really have another area that could absorb those costs if they did come in on the higher end.
Okay, thank you. And then on revenues, line, it's 90532. In 2021, you had actual earnings of 90,000. In 22-23, actual earnings of 130,000. And your year to date is 200,000 as of when this was printed out. What's causing, I mean, this is great, but what's causing this increase in your revenues? And are you hopeful that more revenues are going to be coming in future years?
Sure. So that's unclaimed gas tax. There's that line, and that's what provides us a partial reimbursement of net county cost for actual time spent working in agricultural programs. So part of the reason that it was lower in the past was it goes off of actual time spent working, and we weren't working in them. Okay. So now that we are, we're really realizing a big increase there.
Okay. And then obviously what I believe, because sometimes it comes before us, is that you have a certain amount of state reporting that you need to conduct, right? Is that pretty much for every aspect of your job? Needs to, like the weed management, the weights and measures, does everything go and is reported to the state, or is that just any kind of local obligations?
No, pretty much everything we do is subject to being reported to the state at least once, if not 2 or 3 times. So like our pesticide program, we report financially to the state about it, but then every month I fill out its own report for it, and then there's we're evaluated by the state on it every 3 years as well, and so there's a lot of records that are submitted as part of that process.
And I'm not recalling it, and I'm putting you on the spot because I didn't pre-warn you, but do we get revenues for all the state mandates that we're required to report? Are there any revenues or anything that comes in from the state to help fund those services?
So basically the gas taxes, it's a partial reimbursement on nearly everything that we do. But it's based on net county cost to some extent. So it's a partial reimbursement. Some of our other, we have specific contracts for, say, pest detection, nursery inspection, high-risk pest exclusion, a few different areas like that where we get more complete funding, but of course then there's also another layer of reporting that goes with that funding.
And then do you have any infrastructure that you anticipate needing in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, we're still looking for a workshop space, which admin's aware of, and we'll go through the capital improvement process on that when the time is right. I anticipate in that time frame probably needing 1 or 2 new vehicles. Where we're really trying to keep the old ones going as long as we can, but we have a few that are crossing the 20-year mark, and so probably going to be time to replace 1 or 2 in that time frame.
And then I've got 2 more things, but one, I want to say that I've gotten a lot of calls this year about the mosquitoes, and I know we've talked about it, that in the past we've had some sort of mosquito abatement ability to spray and that sort of thing. Is there any, or do you watch the increase in mosquitoes? And if so, are you prepared that perhaps that might need to be reintroduced back into the services we provide at some point in the future?
Yeah, essentially what the county was doing was being a pest control business for hire at that point. We weren't a mosquito abatement agency. There's a very big difference. So I haven't received enough interest that I feel, we're talking thousands of dollars a year to maintain that equipment, plus additional licenses for staff to operate it. So I haven't seen enough interest to justify that, and I've asked everyone in my office to tell me anytime anyone calls about mosquitoes, and to relay the details of the complaint to me. So we've only
My
received,
forehead is proof that we have mosquito problems right now. But then my last thing, and 2 goals for the future, but I also want to just commend you on the invasive species brochure that you put out, and I'm looking forward to that being available online. But with that, do you have any specific goals for your department this next coming fiscal year?
So I would say my goal first and foremost is to maintain an environment where we'll have the best chance to retain all of our employees. We just can't afford to go back to where we didn't have our department fully staffed. It's untenable. Want to continue working to train staff in the capacity to fulfill all of our mandates. There are some aspects of program areas that we're still not performing that we need to get additional training and learn how to do. And also, we have a new biologist, and it takes several years to train a new biologist up. So that's going to be training him is a huge part of what we're doing over the coming year. Getting our 2 biologists, helping them continue on in their licensing process. And professional development in general is very important. And then professional development for the whole department. Things like, helping everyone on their pest ID skills and stuff. So from the top to the bottom, everyone has as much knowledge as possible to be making the most of their time in the field. But overall, the focus is on core mandates and making sure that we're building the capacity to fulfill all of them.
I do have a question, Chairman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity, and I'm glad you brought up those mandates. I think most of the board participated in a workshop that was hosted by RCRC recently on SB 90 mandates, and this is something that we're all deeply concerned with, especially in rural California, about state mandates. And your department is one of those areas that really has a lot on its shoulders as it relates to state required law. And I think at some point we'd want to dive deeper into your department to see where we're kind of losing ground or where we're not capturing revenues and need to push back a little with the state. This is not the opportune time to do that, but it does impact the bottom line of your budget as it relates to implementing these state mandates without the necessary funding from the state to keep these processes moving along. And I, for one, want to see agriculture survive in this community for a long time to come. So ensuring that we could have you appropriately staffed, more importantly, you and your staff appropriately trained to get there is incredibly important. But if the state's not paying for it and it costs us businesses on the backside, then I'm going to be pretty upset. So I think it behooves the board to revisit this subject somewhere down the road when you have the time available to discuss the various mandates and the cost to the county of those mandates to see if it's worthwhile us pursuing an SB 90 approach.
The nice thing is, as far as that process goes, my annual financial statement to CDFA does largely break that down into the different mandate categories. So like I would be able to tell you how much we spend on pest detection, for example, or whatever. So yeah, I think that would be pretty easy to drill into in a lot of regards.
Any other questions from the board?
I just, you already answered one of my questions. That was 90532, but I was just curious about a couple other revenue sources. 90535, state aid, agricultural mill tax.
Yeah.
What was that one? And then the CDFA weed grant was the other one.
So the mill tax is a percentage of the first sale of pesticides in the state. We get a share of that based on a lot of metrics that include how many inspections we do, how many pesticide applications there are in the county, how many permits there are, how many pounds of pesticides are applied. It's a complex formula that determines that. So that's our second largest revenue source at this point, and it's to support our work in pesticide use enforcement. The weed management grant that's unfortunately a shorter term thing, so it's hard to build any long-term staffing capacity off of that one, but that's something from the state as well that is a grant to support the elimination of noxious weeds and higher priority weeds.
I wanted to circle back on the question Supervisor Short asked as it's specific to pesticide application and those revenue sources. The Regional Water Quality Control Board is starting developing an order with lily producers in our community. And you said it's your second largest income source. In talking with the remaining 3 producers within our county, this is going to be potentially a hard hurdle for them to overcome, depending on what the order looks like. So my question for you is, what's that look like to future budgets if that revenue source goes away?
Well, certainly our oversight of the lily production up in Smith River is a significant part of our pesticide use enforcement program. But it's not the only thing that we do in that program. We also oversee structural pesticide use, and we don't have a lot of other ag use that really requires our oversight in the county. So it would mark a change for the department, but it would certainly mean we'd have a lot more time for other activities as well that we're struggling to get to right now.
Any other questions? Open it up for the public. Any public questions? Seeing no public comment, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much for your time.
Supervisor Starkey?